This is a very important part of that. A lot of people are missing the idea that your body actually knows what it needs, and you can tune into that and begin your own healing journey based mostly off of that. Then you can do all these other things, but first you have to tune in.
That I'm a massage therapist, and currently I think I'm licensed in 4 states. But what I do is listen to the connective tissue in my client's body. And that can mean listening to kind of the muscles. It can mean listening to the craniosacral system, the central nervous system. It can mean listening to organs. And there are all different rhythms in the body. But I would say, for the most part, what I do is listen. And then I follow how the body is saying, hey, can you give me a little nudge here? Give me support here. And of course, there are, over the almost 2 decades, there are so many techniques and tricks and wonderful ways to engage with the body's ability to reset and heal itself. And those are all magnificent. And they're applicable for different people at different times on different days. And ultimately, I think what it should come down to is listening to the body, because the absolute only expert, or the best expert on the planet for what your body needs is your body, and ditto for my body.
So is that for the purpose of trauma release? I know for my wife, that's largely how you've been helping her. And for myself, it's kind of been helping access some traumatized parts of my nervous system, or I should say the fascia system, and kind of helping to reorient that. But is that primarily what it's for, or is there other things that it's kind of focused on?
What a great question. Yes, when we have experienced overwhelming events that we didn't have capacity to process at the time, whether we were a small person or a large person, we can get into maybe definitions of trauma. It's such a buzzword right now, right? But let's just say our system went into overwhelm. We couldn't process it at the time. What happens is our nervous system will maintain the charge until that gets processed. And additionally, our tissues will hold on to information about that event until such time as we have capacity, we've got maturation, we have maybe the ability to do abstract thinking, we have maybe a support network now that we didn't used to have. But the body will hold on, and the nervous system holds on until we can move the process and digest the event, and then really be free of the. So to answer your question briefly, yes, sometimes we're working on a traumatic memory. It comes up and we're just helping it release, but I'm not a trauma therapist. Sometimes we're working on a place in the body where maybe a perpetrator used to hold somebody and it eventually ended up developing cancer. But my job is just to let that tissue clear itself and be free of the charge and the memory and the tension that it maybe has been holding for literally decades. So by listening with compassion and faith and holding the container, the body knows how to release what is no longer necessary to hold.
It's interesting that you say that you describe yourself as I'm not a trauma therapist, but how you're describing your work is actually very similar to how I hear trauma therapists and therapists describe their work. But for them, they're talking about more of like the soul or the mind, the heart, that sort of thing. They're helping those parts find their way to healing. And for you, you're going more kind of directly to the body's systems and helping those systems which have been impacted by such events find their way to peace. It sounds very similar, even though you describe it that way.
Right. I think that's well said, what you just encapsulated. And of course, when our body is releasing energy. We might be shaking, or we might be crying, or we might be laughing, or we might have like a, kind of a clenching up, or even go back to an old posture, an old movement pattern. And often emotions are coming along for the ride with that. Or you could say they are also getting released and cleared while the body is doing it. And honestly, my
Can you
experience.
touch on that just a little bit? Because you talked about, this is something the way that Tanai talks about as well, and she has a biology background, STEM background, all of that. But as an outsider, the only outsider in the room, when you say the emotions go along with that, when I think of trauma, when I think of like going through something, I think it is all emotion. But what you're describing and what tonight tends to describe is like, no, emotions, those there are other things that kind of go along with those thoughts, that go along with those impulses or whatever. Can you describe that a little bit more?
I hope so. Yeah, I will try. Sometimes when I have a beautiful person on my table and they're getting like a little crampy place where they know it's been having an ache or a chronic pain or something, and today is the day it feels it's ready to let go, and we've done a lot of safety container establishing, and then it gets all crampy before it lets go, right? And sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, I know what this is about. And then that memory that is kind of tied to the tissue will come up, and they want to share that memory with their voice. Or sometimes they say, I don't know what this is about. I have no idea. Can I just let it go? And of course, the answer is yes, you can. You don't have to have a story. You don't have to have a visual. You don't have to have a memory. Your body was holding on to something, and you're ready for it to not be holding anymore. So yes, sometimes there are tears. Sometimes there are emotions. Sometimes there's rage. Sometimes there are words. Sometimes there are pictures, and sometimes not. And all of it, the body knows how to release it, let it go. Does that clarify?
So I think just to give the viewers a little bit of an example from my own story, when I had this injury, this just repetitive injury, it had been in 15 years, I had the same injury like 10 times. And it was just constantly happening. And it wasn't, couldn't figure out anything that was actually physical about it. There was something going on there. And it just kept happening. Every time I would get into a martial art, I would practice it for like a month, and then like clockwork, I would get injured at that same place. And one of the things that you had me do that was very effective was, as you were doing your subtle fascial manipulation, you had me think about first the times that the traumatic times, essentially the times where I was injured, and the times where I was feeling a lot of fear about being injured. And then you would have me think about the times where I was in my best place, and like I was just soaring at the top in my sports adventure and just doing all that. And you had me do that again and again. And what you described is that it was kind of bridging the gap and bringing those things together. And you can talk more about that if you'd like. But what it actually, I found that happening is later on when I went back into practicing martial arts and all of that, I had that. And as when my body started getting nervous and started, which usually was a precursor to getting injured, I thought through that, and I went back to those places and went back to that. And then my body felt better and I was able to keep going. So it's one of those things that like I can't fully explain, but I know it works. And I would love, yeah.
Well said. That's such a great example. Thank you for sharing it. And I can't really explain it either. There may be some neurologists out there who can explain it, and we all kind of have come to know the catchphrases like things that fire together, wire together. But I think there's something, what the technique that we were kind of offering your body that day is called pendulating, where you're going back and forth from something that's really comfortable and safe and yummy to something that is uncomfortable and maybe scary, right? Whether that's something in the future or something in the past, by going back and forth, there's a special alchemy that happens with the body, at least the mammalian body. It's not just people. I had a rescue dog, And the first night she was with me, she practiced pendulating, which is like one of the big discoveries of trauma therapy in the last, 50 years. But my dog knew it, she was pretty smart. And she had to go up these stairs, and you could tell she was terrified. And she literally put like one paw on the bottom stair and she ran back to the couch. When she was ready, she went back and she did 2 paws, first and second stair, ran back to the couch. So she was getting herself grounded in her safety and then giving herself a little challenge. And that's essentially, I'm just going to say, it's one of the magic alchemist spells that bodies can cast. When you give them duality, they create something precious and magnificent out of it.
The duality of that and bringing those two things together. It reminds me actually of something that I have been learning myself about growth and maturity, is the idea that how integral, I should say, how integral being able to hold two things together in tension is to a maturation journey. And I know that's not exactly what you're talking about, but the idea of, for
It is.
myself, there was a while back that I was really struggling with some things that I had been through, some emotional and spiritual struggles that I'd been through, and I had a lot of angry conversations with my higher power. And it eventually, there was one day where it hit the point where it was like, I accept that my higher power is good, and that what I went through sucks, and that these, it's not but, it's not or, it's not, they're not contradicting each other. They're not, it's good because I went through that. Like, no, that sucks, and my higher power is good. And it felt like there was this new connection that happened in my brain because of being able to hold those two things together. And it was like my experience of life just elevated at that point. It sounds like what you're talking about is similar in a way for the body, like allowing the body to almost develop new connections and align and mature in that way, grow stronger in that way. Would you say that's accurate?
100%. And I love how you said that. For me, just because of how I sense into my body, when I have experienced these moments of maturation where there was something that felt like there was a tension and it was irreconcilable, and then all of a sudden I was able to hold them both from a bigger place, I felt like it was that my heart grew, like the Grinch, right? My heart grew a size, or a half a size maybe, right? Depending on what I was trying to hold. But I think it's actually exactly parallel, not just metaphor. I really think what you're pointing to in our personal development or spiritual or soul growth, our bodies, as it's not separate and it's not parallel. It's together. And one of my favorite helpers of people healing their trauma is David Berceli, who created the fail-proof way to initiate and invite the body's natural reflex to tremor. It's called TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises. But he is so eloquent speaking to that we never are going to go back and be who we would have been if we didn't have this traumatic event occur, right? However, once we resolve it, grow around it, through it, get bigger than it, whatever words we use about resolving the traumatic event. I mean, obviously we survived, okay? So if you survived and you're traumatized, you survived. So then you're never going to be who you were, but you become someone so much beyond who you ever could have become. And I certainly am not recommending that we all go out and traumatize each other. Absolutely not. But there is a golden lining in moving into our trauma therapy if we recognize, hey, I maybe have been carrying some stuff I don't want to carry anymore. you absolutely become bigger than you were in whatever way you want to talk about it.
I read a post the other day that the person was talking about the adage, what doesn't hurt you make you, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And they were working through this because they were really struggling with that. And like, no, that's like, that's trying to say that trauma is great and all that stuff. Sometimes it's not. And they came to the realization that it's like, not that the trauma is that it's not that the trauma is what makes you stronger. It's healing from the trauma that makes you stronger than you ever could have been, because now you've actually gone through stuff and you've become stronger again, much more than someone who's never been through anything could ever achieve.
Right. Well said. Yeah.
So we're doing this a little bit out of order today, but hey, we're going with the conversation. So, how did you get into this? Was it something that spurred out of your own story, or was it like, hey, I always want to do something similar to this, and then an opportunity opened up, or like, where did this come from?
Yeah, no, from the time I was 14, I was absolutely determined to become a naturopathic physician. I had kind of, with my own special mix of analysis of what I saw in my culture or in my family or in myself, and synthesizing patterns, because I am one of those people who loves watching patterns and noticing them. I had discovered all 6 of the principles of a naturopathic medicine, and I can't list them all off for you now, but when I then discovered that naturopathic medicine existed, I was like, what? I thought I was going to have to like create this whole new thing, and oh my gosh, it was going to be so much work. And then I was like, no, they have, schools you can go to, med schools, and do it. Like, it's already, somebody else paved that road. I was elated. And then by the time I was kind of gearing up to attend, and I had to do some post-baccalaureate sciences, and because I love science, but I had wanted to start with philosophy. So I started with a BA in philosophy. And then I
Speaking
was
as
like,
a philosopher, I may be biased, but I think you started in the right place. Learn how to think first, and then go into the hard sciences.
Bingo, exactly. Learn how to think first. Wouldn't we wish that on everyone? So, but by the time I was feeling, and I also heard the dictum, physician heal thyself. And I thought, oh, well, forget that. I'm a mess. So, really, I really thought, okay, I think I'm about ready to do this. And I had a small child. And I was like, I'm not leaving my baby for somebody else to raise. And I 100% respect that there are parents, women and men, who can go to school and do intense programs and also be present and raise their kids. And I didn't believe that I would have that capacity to do justice to either. And so I was like, okay, table that for a while. And then by the time I was like, okay, I'm ready, she's school age, it was clear that the marriage I was in was just a disaster. And so I thought, well, I don't have time for 6 years of med school right now. So what I did have time for was a year of massage therapy or school, massage therapy certification. And I have remembered that when I had been pregnant, I had never had a massage before, but I had really pretty bad sciatica pain going down one of my legs in the back. And a friend, referred me to somebody who specialized in pregnancy massage, and literally, like, that pain was gone. I had been limping around with it for weeks, and I had no idea, right, that it was that easy. I mean, it's not easy, but compared to a layman, it was just like, that's a miracle. And so I thought, you know what, if what you want to do is help people increase their quality of life, you don't have to be a doctor. If what you want to do is be able to support your daughter, then yeah, just help people, support your family, and go. So that was how I kind of dumb lucked into it, because as it turns out, what I really, really love is I'm a touch junkie. And a lot of naturopaths get to touch a lot of their patients, sometimes a little bit, but I don't think very many of them come close to body workers, how much we get to spend time actually hands-on, literally. So I just got lucky, really.
And it's interesting. So did you discover this type of the like fascia manipulation? I'm assuming that came after you got into massage therapy, and then this was kind of more of a specialization that came out of it.
Yeah. So I was incredibly blessed. I had just phenomenal teachers all the way through massage therapy school. And they were talking about fascia back in the, what, like 2004, 2005, where there had been the first couple of international fascia congresses. I mean, fascia is not a new word, not a new thing, but it wasn't in the common parlance the way it is now, I think, with anybody who's ever been to a gym or worked out or looked at TikTok or whatever. Like, it's everywhere now, right? The fascia blaster or whatever. So yes, when you get out of massage school, it's kind of like having your driver's license, right? Like, the chances are good you're not going to do any harm. You're probably not going to, kill anybody is really what the license is about. Um, but then you get to spend the rest of your life taking continuing ed and really steering how you want to focus your practice. And some people, they jump straight to doing energy work, and that's their what is it called? That's their thing. That's their jam. I knew from the get-go that I wanted to work with fascia, and there are so many ways. And so I started just gobbling up continuing ed, like way beyond the minimum requirement for the state of Oregon. A lot of us do that. I'm not alone. We can't really help it. We're, as much as we're touch junkies, we're also kind of continuing ed junkies. And we have this perfect excuse, right? Because there's a client that we can't quite figure out. And so then we're like, oh, I need to take this class. This will help them. And I used to say, jack of all trades, master of the universe, because collecting different ways of working with the body and working with the fascial web really felt to me like each of these amazing mentors were magnificent in their own right. And they had created modalities all by themselves, John Barnes with Myofascial Release, and Aaron Mattis with active isolated stretching, and really different things. John Upledger with craniosacral, Jean-Pierre Barral with visceral manipulation. There's so many wonderful contributors to the world of how do we listen to the fascial web in the body. And a lot of people are good at just focusing. They pick away and they go. And I have great respect for that, and I'm not good at it at all. And so for me, hopping around, I really did feel like I was getting pieces of the puzzle that in some ways would clarify the whole picture when I brought them together. And I think that might,
in a way, specialists are amazing in really digging in and delving into a single discipline. But I think in our culture, we tend to focus so much on specialists, and it doesn't matter the discipline, whether the STEM, the sciences, it doesn't matter where you point at in society or economy or whatever. But it's really the generalists, I think, that they tend to get overlooked because they're a little bit more rare, I think. And there's not as much education for those types of people. But those are the people who are really, like you say, putting the whole picture together. And without those type of people, we'll have a bunch of very interesting silos that never talk to each other and have a very serious cap on their potential to improve. So what you're saying you're doing is you're learning from everyone and honoring what they do, but you want to look at a little bit bigger picture and see how it all goes together, and therefore be able to take someone further because of it.
Hopefully that's the goal. Yeah.
So let's riff on that a little bit, because that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was let's talk about that bigger picture, and let's talk about the work that you do, and how this kind of fits with the different modalities and the different, not just within physical therapy, but I know you're a very holistic thinker yourself, in the field, the physical medicine and the mental disciplines and improvements, and like, just where does this fit in kind of someone's wellness journey if they were starting a journey, or if they were on their journey? What might someone have come to before you? What might they go to after you? Like, where would it be? What would that look like for you to be integrated into someone's wellness journey?
Yeah. That is a great question, and I should be able to answer it right off the bat. I'm there for a lot of people. Massage therapy is kind of the gateway to safe, therapeutic physical touch. I'm a little disappointed to report that there are very well-meaning, I think, people with good intentions who don't really listen to the body because they haven't really been trained probably to listen. And there are people who have been really harmed by their practitioners, whether it's a massage therapist, a PT, a chiropractor, a, an allopathic conventional doctor. And so for some people, the first sort of step along the journey of, I don't know why I can't sleep and I can't digest food and whatever, I'm irritable, blah, 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 is to just have a regular old therapeutic, like, relaxation massage. And we should never ever knock the power of just having a little TLC, because ultimately the body is the one who not only is the expert, but who's going to do the heavy lifting to fix whatever it is, unless you have, a severe injury that requires an emergency room or surgery. The body's pretty much going to fix everything else. We might be able to help it, whether we're somebody who believes in antibiotics or chiropractic adjustments or whatever it is, we might help it, but who's actually going to do the heavy lifting is the body, right? Nobody can heal the other person. We heal ourselves. So the first step could just be going to get a massage. I personally go and get massage. If that's what I think I need, I go get some. But on any given day, I might want a different modality, right? And so it's great that there are so many options. People who have come to me typically have already tried the standard, in Oregon, we have a lot of chiropractors, we have a lot of acupuncturists, we have a lot of massage therapists, we have a lot of naturopaths, because we have all those schools here, right? So typically, if I get a referral, it's somebody who's kind of done the basics already. And so if their practitioners are stumped, that should have resolved by now, that's when I get really excited. Like, ooh, give me a situation that is a little more challenging. That's where I love to step in and, simultaneously kind of analyze, why is what was tried before by these perfectly wonderful and caring practitioners, why was that not working? Like, what's going on? And on the other side, like, what is going to work, right? And so getting to do that problem solving piece, I just thrive on it. And I have to share, if I may, one anecdote from, sometimes I don't have it and I can't get it, whatever it is the body wants, right? And so I think it's really important to be able to ask your own higher power and the body's wisdom, and just have some ways to access your intuition. There are people who have a direct line to their divine source, to their own inner intuition, right? I tend to use a lot of what I call magic finger. If I say, is my name Mickey Mouse, there's nothing I can do to break that open. But if I say, is my name Claire, it just like flicks right open, right? So there are lots of ways that people, some people use a pendulum or whatever, but that we can tune into knowing. So
And
I had
it's
this.
almost a way of tuning into, uh, I tend to think of the body as kind of like a radio where it's receiving all of these signals and processing all of this information. So there's such a small percentage of that that goes through your like conscious mind where you're able to think those thoughts and process and speak those things. There's so much going on outside of that that your body is still processing, that you're saying like you have found your way of tapping into that. And it reminds me of, there's these other practices where people are able to kind of ask the body a question, and then whether or not the body is able to hold a restraint against a restraint or something like that, they like the body, and it's right. From what I've understood, it's probably exaggeration, but it's right nearly every time. And people are able to look into that. And for my own way, it tends to be much more like visual in my mind's eye, being able to kind of picture my body. And I've developed this understanding. And that was one of the things that I noticed about you as we were talking about it, is I noticed that you and I had different language and different ways of approaching what was happening, but we were both describing the same thing, and or at least describing things that coexisted with each other. And like you would be processing something in my body as you were manipulating, you were doing it, and you were sensing it, and like what you were sensing and I was seeing, it was happening at the same time without us saying a word. And I would, for example, I would, to use the previous example of like going between those different states of like my traumatic memories and my happy memories, all of that, I would switch from one to the other and you would immediately sense it, and I never said a word, and you'd sensed it. And or I would kind of, and it became this kind of interplay between us where I would be able to say, well, I see this thing over here, I feel this thing over here, this is what I've seen. And it became this almost like conversation where we were both listening to our intuitive, uh, where however we developed that kind of intuitive sense. And it really just kind of like went to the next level, I feel. But I wanted to add that as just kind of here's a, for someone who may be watching and like, oh, that sounds weird or whatever, like I, like for me, those are like little evidences of like this is actually legit, when something is like I didn't say a word and yet you picked up on something and it was accurate to what I was sensing, and like all of that, like okay, it's what, however we describe it, it's working.
Yeah.
And I love that about delving into it. I think this is something that people will one day understand far more,
Mm-hmm.
but right now it doesn't make it any less true. Right now it just means that we don't understand it as much.
Exactly. And I love that you teased that out, because there have been a couple times where I really had to have that look in the mirror. And like with Bowen work, for example, I could not explain how you could do some very light touches on somebody and leave the room, and they would start doing all kinds of unwinding and healing and releasing of tension patterns and pain patterns that had been there for years. Because everything that I knew about fascia prior to that moment was about holding sacred space, holding the body, palpating, tracking subtle changes. And here I was leaving the room, right? And I hated the Bowen therapy at first. I will just honestly say that. But my amazing clients who let me practice on them, even though I was like, I don't know what this is, over time, we got to see that it did work. And in fact, it was breakthrough for a lot of people who had kind of plateaued a little bit. So many anecdotes, but I had to have that moment of, do you want to understand how it works, or do you want to help people? And so I had to let go of needing to understand. I still want to understand. and maybe I've come up with a few little kind of quasi explanations at this point, but what I want to do is what's the most effective, the most efficient way to get somebody back to their thriving that you were talking about at the beginning. Because really, truly, we're not here to just survive, in my opinion. Like, we are here on earth for so much. And I don't know what anybody else's journey is, but I want to help them have whatever their journey is, as comfortably as they can. Yeah. And can
go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to circle back around as you were returning to the pendulating. I just wanted to put in a plug for, yes, it's a very simple concept. And if we are someone who has a known or an unknown, like a surprise trauma history, it's really important that that safe, good, yummy place be held solidly. And that's where you have to know if this is something where you go get a trained therapist or a trusted grandmother or whoever to hold the good therapeutic space. It's not necessarily something that you just are like, oh, I'll set up a couple chairs in my kitchen and bounce back and forth, because yeah, that'll totally work for some people who can hold the witness for themselves, but it is not going to be a great experience for everybody. And taking that a step further, that's why I'm kind of opposed to exposure therapy, because what I think we really want when we use the word therapy, I think exposure therapy is like an oxymoron. What we really want is for that alchemical magic to happen between the two states of being, right? The like victimized state and the powerful state, and forcing somebody to try to find power from the victimized state is not
Sounds like what you really want is to build a bridge between the place that is feeling the fear and a safe place, so that to use a little bit more of my background and the type of healing that my wife and I have done, a lot more ego state therapy, where it has to do with bringing that traumatized part of your psyche, in that case, into a safe space. So you are building that bridge, but it has to do with bringing those two things together. It's not just sending a child off to war. It's like, no, bringing that child into that has been traumatized by war into a safe home.
Yeah. Yeah. So just a plug for therapeutic therapy. Yeah. And for safety being part of trauma therapy. And I know there are people who loved their exposure therapy experiences. Good on them. That's great.
I love that you kind of segued perfectly into that, of what people might do on their own to try to start to implement some of these things that you've been learning and that you've been talking about. Say someone is really struggling right now. You mentioned earlier, like, okay, go get a massage. That's one thing that they can do. But like, what are some other things that, in order to find some equilibrium, to find some peace, to find some kind of relief or improvement right now, if someone's struggling, what are some things you would suggest?
Okay, this is such a fun question because it can go 1,000 different directions, right? Like, I believe, being a philosopher at heart, that the most important place to absolutely begin is to discern and to decide what your beliefs are about healing and about your power to heal. Because ultimately, if you believe that, people are flawed, they break down, gravity is never, we're never going to overcome gravity, only the doctor can help me, whatever beliefs you have, if you believe them, I honor your belief, and anything else you do is kind of going to be spinning your wheel, because those beliefs are going to hold you to making them come true, essentially. And
It's like the
so,
opposite of a placebo effect, where it's not
yeah,
just that what you believe is like if you believe this will help you, then the body actually will respond as if it does. The opposite is actually true as well. If you believe that this is unhelpable, if this is unimprovable, if you believe that you can't heal, it honestly doesn't matter what the doctors are going to do. In many cases, in some like acute cases, it actually will, but the more chronic kind of long-term stuff where the body has to do the work. If you believe and you're telling the body that it's not going to heal, it won't in many cases.
yeah, that's an uphill battle for sure. And I cannot tell you how many times doctors have said to somebody, this is as good as it gets, especially with head injuries, which are my favorite, both from my personal history and my client base. I think when I left town a few years ago, about 80% of my clients were post concussion recovery. And some of these people were decades out, but a lot of times doctors will say, like, at the 2-year mark, like, that's as good as it's going to get. You can't really heal after that, blah, 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 whatever. Um, and despite the belief that that would be true, you can get amazing accomplishment toward a therapeutic goal. You can like sneak it in past the belief system sometimes, right? But only if you can get people to come and let you get your hands on it. Because, you know, sometimes, let's say the bone behind your eyeball, it's my favorite bone in the body, called the sphenoid bone, goes between the temples, kind of underneath the part of the frontal lobe. If that one gets, let's say you're in like you get T-boned and that bone literally gets like knocked a little bit. It doesn't take much to mess a lot of things up. You might have weird vision issue, or you might have just weird, you could have headache, pain. You could, I mean, so many things could happen because it's in the center, right? It could even mess with your hormones because the pituitary gland sits in this little pocket inside the sphenoid bone. It's like a bone pocket. It's the safest place in the body. But if you get jostled, it could get messed up, right? So let's say you had all kinds of wonderful therapies, but nobody ever asked your sphenoid bone if it wanted to go home. So then a fascial listening therapist, no matter what their credentials are, I don't care. They could be an osteopath, they could be a craniosacral therapist. If they help that bone get back home, then symptoms you had for decades can disappear. And
Home meaning in its proper position.
yeah, it's physiological neutral position. Yeah, because form and function go together. They really do. And when you're where you're supposed to be, oriented the way you're supposed to be, you're going to function better. And that's, so there's a lot of, partly that's, I think, why I love working with traumatic brain injury survivors so much, is that we can sometimes get massive leaps forward even years after the event. And that's really satisfying and fun. It's a little mischievous.
It sounds like what you would suggest when someone's first getting started or first trying to find that is taking time to make sure that they actually believe they can get better, because that sets the stage for what comes next. And then what does come next? Say someone has spent that time, now they've decided they want to actually pursue something more kind of, I don't want to say long term because who knows how long the healing will take, but just something that's more sustained. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about the moment. It's about let's start improving my life now.
Yeah, yeah. I love this question. The Claire version of it is very simplistic. And I want to direct people also to Dr. Bredesen, Dale Bredesen, and his work and his team. He's got a fabulous team too, with healing Alzheimer's and dementia and all that good stuff. So the Claire version, I mean, I'm delighted with him because he basically figured out what I figured out, except he did it in a much more sophisticated way. And so it's just really fun. But there's basically two things that are preventing our natural healing ability. That's my belief system, is that we were designed to heal. You know, I got poison oak a little bit earlier. I've had blackberry scratches, kitty scratches. bumped myself, got a bruise. All this stuff heals. You get a cold, you get a flu, whatever. It all heals. We're designed to heal. That's my belief. You probably can't shake me from it. Now, if I have something that's not resolving, that's not auto-correcting, right, then there's a reason. And these reasons fall into two categories. One, there's either a building block that's missing. Maybe my body doesn't have enough magnesium to whatever. Or the other piece is maybe it's got obstacles. And those usually look like toxins, whether it's heavy metals or mold from outside the system, or it could be a pathogen or a parasite, or it could be metabolic waste. It could be something that we're eating, and for whatever reason our body decided that thing is toxic for us, and we're eating it every day. So those are the two things. There's something missing, or you've got obstacles, or both. And I know it's simplistic, but it's a great place to start, because then you can really take stock and do a very gentle detox. Figure out how you want to do that. You can go to a naturopath, or you can get something off the shelf at Rite Aid, like a colon cleanse for 10 days or whatever the thing is. Just start wherever it's comfortable for you to start. But starting is the only way to get going, right?
Is this where someone might go to get some blood work, or go to a dietitian, or go to something like that, where they can start assessing themselves of what's going on in their body as far as nutritionally and all that?
Exactly. There are nutritional therapists. If you think, oh yeah, I probably need to hone in on the dietary stuff, you can do hair mineral analysis. It's pretty cheap by comparison and interestingly, it gives you a longitudinal view, whereas blood gives you a momentary view. Also, with blood, I'm not knocking blood tests, but you just have to be aware of the pros and cons of every assessment, right? Your body will do almost anything to keep the levels of minerals at a good homeostasis for its functioning. So it may be sticking all kinds of heavy metals in your bicep or your hamstring or something, because it's like, I've got to get these heavy metals out of the blood. So your blood might say you're fine, but lo and behold, you've got, a bunch of lead and aluminum in your brain or whatever, right? So it does bear, that's why you want to get sometimes one of those experts that I was knocking earlier. You do want to get an expert, like, how should I do the assessment to find out what is really going on? That being said, a lot of us find ourselves without, Cadillac insurance, or without extra PIN money that we can dedicate that way. And I just want to put in a plug for you. Get to experiment on yourself if you're going to be paying attention, taking notes, and being compassionate about it. So at some point about 20 some years ago, I took myself off all the major allergens for, I think, 6 weeks. It might have been 12. But so we're talking, soy, corn, dairy, peanuts, citrus, nightshades, gluten. I think there was another one. I didn't eat any of that stuff for weeks on end. And as you add things back in one at a time, very carefully, that's called an elimination diet. It was obvious that when I ate eggs, that's the one I was missing. When I ate eggs, I had this little piece of eczema right here. I took the eggs out, it cleared right up. I added eggs again. And my eggs were like the best eggs west of the Mississippi. I was sprouting organic grains for my chickens. They were on pasture with bugs and, filtered water and seaweed. I mean, these are the best eggs. And my body still was like, oh no, I don't like that. I don't like that. So there are ways, if we're willing to pay attention, there are ways to cut costs and still get some good information. And that's how I found out I don't do well with gluten. So yeah, that was one of the ways. There were others too. Me and gluten, whatever.
So speaking of finding those experts and finding finding your path forward, Where does someone go to find a Claire in their area or online? Like, I know you have your website that you we'll put in the description below. But where does someone go to when they want to try out some of the different methodologies that you've been talking about here?
Yeah. Well, I really think it's nice if you can to get a referral from a trusted friend, neighbor, colleague, etc. Because when you're dealing with your body, um, it's really personal, and you want to go to somebody who, at least someone you trust, says is trustworthy, you know. And I do believe that word of mouth is the best referral system that we have as humans. So plug for word of mouth. However, you know, somebody might be watching this and be like, well, Claire's in Oregon and I'm in Missouri. So the modalities, what if you can figure out what modality you want to offer to your system, to your organism, your body, almost all the modalities have a find a therapist tab in their website. And about once a week, I'll get a referral, whether it's from TRE or biofield tuning or Bowen therapy, not so much the myofascial release, but other ones, craniosacral therapy. For practitioners, I've heard that if you can link up with another practitioner who refers to you, that can be a great referral source from a practitioner who just loves your work and refers all other people to you. I haven't gone that
So are you
route.
saying, so you're saying that, for example, if someone hears about Bowen work and they're like, oh, well, let's try that, and they Google Bowen work, and then you're saying that they could probably find a local practitioner who does that sort of thing if they just took that route. So it's kind of more of like a let's experiment, kind of like your elimination diet thing, like let's experiment and let's try this, see if this helps, that sort of thing. So where could someone go to kind of get a list of the different modalities or an idea of like, well, these are the different things that are possible and what are they for, type of thing?
Oh my gosh, that is an amazing question. I'm not sure how to begin to answer. There are hundreds of modalities to work therapeutically with the body, in terms of you go to somebody and receive their trained therapeutic techniques, right? And then there are hundreds of ways that you can work with yourself. And like melt is amazing. It's a way to give yourself myofascial release. Sue Hitzman created the melt method, where you would go to somebody to kind of learn how to do it, but you can do it for yourself all the time. You can also, there's so many ways, right? It's almost like I can't believe we're not all just stumbling around healing all the time, because there are so many ways the body's like, yes, I'll try that. Whatever you give me, I'll try that. I do have a caveat though, that if we find something that works, I don't think we want to get stuck in it. And I'm going to say this is not just because I'm a little butterfly who likes to try lots of different things. I have seen this again and again with my client base too, that we say, oh, well, I know that, you know, like EFT tapping, I know that works for me. Okay, great. But if you get to a plateau, you might want to branch out and do something that isn't EFT, because it's almost like, as much as our body does want to heal, there are parts of us always that are like, dude, don't rock the boat. We're fine. We survived. Stop trying to like stir things up, right? There's that tensional dynamic within us always on the healing journey. I'm not the first one. I'm not the last to figure that out. It's definitely a thing. It exists. So when your body is like, oh yes, I'm very comfortable with this amount of healing, this is fine. If you want to go beyond that, you want to break through, then you're probably going to have to find a new modality that you haven't tried before. And it might be one you don't even like or want to do. But I would say get really curious and courageous about trying things. Like, I needed a breakthrough once, and I was receiving one or two because I was post concussion myself. I was receiving 1 or 2 bodywork sessions a week, but I was at a plateau. And I went to a friend and I said, I don't know what you need to do to me, but you got to do something new. I need a breakthrough. And he did this amazing session with essential oils, which I think they're beautiful, but I mean, I don't expect them to do like a breakthrough. They totally did. They absolutely did. I was integrating and recovering from that session for like 3 days. And partly because my body didn't have any defenses against the therapeutic action, right? I don't know. So I don't even know where to start. Just start talking to somebody who looks really healthy and ask them what they did to get there. Because really, to be healthy in this culture these days, I'm betting you did something special. Either that or you're an alien. I don't know.
I'm going to put, just so the viewers know, I'm going to put a link to a search that I did on Perplexity, and feel free to do this search yourself, Claire, and viewers. Perplexity is an AI web search engine tool where you can say, hey, find me all of these different things, and it's a like an AI chat GPT plus Google search engine, and I love it for research. But you can look up what are all the different modalities related to myofascial release or all that, and what are they for, and it will give you a list and explain it to you in a way that you can understand. And that might be a great way to start off. Hey, here are some things. This sounds relatively might be related to what I'm going through, and let's see if there's anyone local. Like that might be a great place for you to start. So I'm gonna put a link to that search, or maybe just a couple of those modalities in the description of this. Is there anything that you would like to discuss that we haven't yet that you would like to touch on?
I think you had a great question. I don't quite remember it, but just sort of where do we start our healing journey? Kind of a whole different take on it. I just like if you could do just one thing, kind of. I can never narrow it down that hard, right? Because most of us are touch deprived. Most of us are sunlight deprived. Most of us are earth touch deprived. And you know, the way we ground in a yoga class is great. I'm all for yoga, qigong, tai chi, like whatever movement is therapeutic for keeping your flow flowing is great. And it's not the same as actually having your bare feet on the earth. We are electromagnetic beings. The earth is an electromagnetic being. And to get truly biophysically grounded is huge. The vast majority of human history, we have been living in touch with the earth. And it's only been like 100 years that we're not. I don't think we have evolved to be separated from our mother that way. So yes, sunlight, it's so amazing that sometimes I tune into podcasts that are talking specifically just about the benefits of sunlight. We have our own version of photosynthesis. Like we really actually need the sun. So these very basic things, water, my gracious, we've all heard that we're 70% water, but if you count the molecules, we're 99% water. So does it matter what kind of water we drink and whether we bless it as we're consuming it? Oh my gosh, I think it probably does. And when you do a deep dive into the biophysics of water, who's that magnificent researcher at University of Washington, Gerald Pollack, is one way for like the science geeks. And then we've got Veda Austin and Isabel Friend. I mean, they both can talk about the science and the beauty and the mystery and the magic. Like, so like if someone says, what's the one thing? I can't narrow it down. But I would say, you know, water, earth, and sun are, those three are a really good place to start. And then you can have fun figuring out the food and the toxins and the thises and the that's, but start with those three would be a suggestion, because they're all free.
Start with something free and then later see what you have to pay for.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Claire, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation and really a unique one in this. This is an area that I certainly had no idea about before I met you and before I started getting into it with you. And I still feel like I'm just touching the edges, trying to figure out, but I know it works. I know it has worked for me. I know it has worked for my wife and it has worked for you. And I just wanted to thank you for essentially kind of what I would describe what you're doing is you're being an advocate for the body. As like this is the body deserves a voice and bringing that voice to the table and helping the people who are seeking healing, helping the people who are seeking to heal others, helping them tune in and pay attention. And this is something that I can tell you are really passionate about. And it's something that really needs to happen. Our medical system, everything needs to kind of, this is a very important part of that a lot of people are missing. And the idea that your body actually knows what it needs. And you can tune into that and begin your own healing journey based mostly off of that tuning in, and then you can supplement, you can do all these other things, but first you have to tune in and believe that you can heal. But I also just want to take special note of the humble goodness, for lack of a better word, in that the way you described it, you want to understand how it works. And some of that I totally understand myself. Like I want to be able to explain it kind of so that I don't feel like I'm doing something stupid or whatever. Like I want to be able to explain it in this very hard way. But you're like, well, I either be stuck on the fact that I can't really explain it, or I can try to help people. And if I wait till I can explain it fully, there's so many people that are going to go unhelped. And I want to make sure that those people are helped. So I want to recognize that in you and thank you for that, because I know that my life is better, my wife's life is better, and I know that there are so many other people whose lives are better because you made that decision. So thank you. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I super enjoyed this conversation.